All right, welcome back to Overengineered, the podcast where we ask the question, what's the absolute best way to do things we already have a perfectly acceptable solution for? Today, we're not exactly over-engineering, but I have, I hope, a really interesting conversation coming up. So we've got Ian Landsman back on. Welcome back, Ian.
Thank you. Good to be back.
And I think the reason that I reached out to you again about this topic is this is something I've been thinking about for a while, and it seems to me like you have been circling around the same thing around sort of broadly the idea of burnout, but also just like how do you stay um, like invigorated and interested in working on something when that you've been working on for literally decades.
Right.
um and what's how do we sort of survive that, or find ways to rejuvenate. That was sort of the starting point, and then I think the subtopic that's just been very related, but just has been very topical, is just this question of how does stuff like Twitter play into that. I know we've been talking a little bit on Twitter or online about that topic, and I have a few thoughts there. So that's kind of where I'm starting from. Does that ring true to you?
Yeah, we could definitely cover those. I don't know if I'm an expert in the burnout space, but I've definitely had my share of it on various degrees, I would say. So could share some takeaways, I guess, and knowledge there. And then yeah, I mean, social media, who knows what we're gonna do with that. We can hash that out too, but I don't know if there's any good solutions there either. But
We'll solve the social media problem today.
yeah, maybe we're gonna start a new business right here on air with the solution.
I love it. Well, I guess I was more asking, it sounded to me like from some of the things that you were talking about on mostly technical and have said online, a little bit around the um the push to try to do a rewrite and then walk away from that, which I think many people can relate to that experience.
Yeah,
But it's like, yeah, sometimes we take that stuff on just to like find some new energy for a thing. And so
yeah.
it seems to me like this is something that you seem to be kind of trying to figure out for yourself. Do you feel like um you're like in a phase of burnout, or do you feel like that's not really true for you?
I think I am a little bit right now. I think anytime you come off of like a big project that you were working hard on and then it doesn't work out for whatever reason, whether you stop it or whatever, you're kind of getting a little lull after that. So I would say a bit. I definitely am recovering from that, I think. But yeah, it's interesting around that because it's like part of it is when you work on something a long time, although I think this even applies, it doesn't have to be 20 years like I've worked on HelpSpot, but even a few years, especially as developers, a lot of us got into this to be creative is how I look at it. And like writing code, I find to be very creative. And then you get to a place with a product where you're doing bug fixes, or even when you're doing features that customers are asking for, they're not necessarily the features you would want to build if you could just build anything you wanted to build. And so you do have those like ebbs and flows there. And I've tried different ways to deal with that. And I don't know if any have been super effective. I've definitely done side projects and side activities, and some of that helps. But I don't know. I think what I'm kind of coming around, this is my current thinking on it, is more like a stoic sort of attitude about it and just being more acceptance oriented. It's like, and finding other outlets. Like this is for the last like 10 years or so, I've been really into poker. And that's been sort of a creative, competitive outlet for when maybe the main product was just chugging along and stuff's happening and it's fine, but there wasn't necessarily anything big and new to build or things like that. It's like, okay, well, poker could be like this outlet and hobby. And nice upside of like physically getting me away from a computer. For the most part, although now like everything's on your phone, so it's only partially successful at that, but it's still somewhat successful. You're physically sitting next to the other humans. Um, so yeah, I've been kind of getting more into that mindset, and then also just like because there's just other things going on. Kids are getting older and all that stuff, and it's like, well, I could be spending a lot of time on like running the business and doing all the stuff that needs, and then also thinking about other things or tinkering with other code, other places, and but then that starts to eat into all the other time you need, and it's like, maybe that's just all misguided. So that's kind of where I'm at currently. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to a lot of that. Um, I think I think it really is true that when you have, a product that gets stable enough to have paying customers for decades, right? You start to work on different things. Um, we talked about this a little bit in the episode on project management, um, but definitely at Internachi we have a much larger focus on, you know, fixing things that are like paper cuts for staff, uh, over building new features, because that's like that's where the biggest ROI is like there's people working here who have to deal with our product every day, and like,
Right.
the stuff that they come across and the stuff that our members come across, uh have a huge impact on everyone, whereas new features are fun to work on, but um you have to change that balance, I think. um and it does it fixing bugs is not as fun as
Right.
creating new things from
Usually.
scratch, right?
Yeah.
Usually, yeah. um and I also agree. I mean, when Joe Tenenbaum was on, we were talking about, he kept on saying that he was really surprised that folks were, um, you know, as responsive to his CLI experiments.
Mm,
Um, and I had said at the time, like, it doesn't surprise me at all, because I think programming is art more than anything else, right?
yeah.
And what is art if not something to, like, explore the boundaries of, and enjoy experimentation, and like all the things that he was doing with those, even though they weren't practical, like that's why a lot of us are in it, right?
And even the
So
other side, is the person viewing the art, like, and appreciating it. Like, I never installed any of his stuff. Like, I just watched him do it online, on
mhm.
Twitter or whatever, and it's like, "Oh, that's amazing and cool," and I'm, like, talking about it, and even though I don't have a need for it, it's like just seeing him push the boundaries of that was entertaining and
Yeah.
I appreciated it.
Yeah, I'm curious for you. So something that I've done over the last 2 years, I would say, there was a period of time when, I think when you are in a more, executive management type role, um, but are a developer, it's easy for the the management side of things to take over. And I felt like that was really impacting my just quality of life. And so over the last couple of years, I've made a pretty concerted effort to sort of shift things around so that I can, make time for programming, because that's the thing that I'm probably most fulfilled by. I think that if I weren't doing any of the business stuff, I would miss it. I
Yeah.
don't. It's not that I'm not that I don't enjoy that, but especially some of the more just day-to-day operation stuff, I am glad to offload that to other folks and make more space for programming. Um have Is that something that you've had to like be intentional about, or has it just kind of worked out for you in that way?
I don't think I've been as intentional about these things as I would have liked to have been, probably, but I do think there is for me, I have quite a ebb and flow between those 2 where, like, there'll be phases where I'm like, I love just managing, I love that stuff's happening, and I don't have to be the one to do it, and my brain can be clear to do other things, and then I'll get a little more in the zone of like, "Man, but I miss doing the things myself with my own hands, and so let me, like, go do that." Um But then often then come around in that scenario of like, but like the reality is, like, there's just the government sends me a stupid form I have to fill out, and that takes 2 hours. And then, something with the payroll processor thing, and then this other thing, and the taxes and the accountant. And like, you're constantly distracted when you're, the founder or, manager in some way. And so, like, that then takes away from your time doing the programming anyway. Like, there's not a lot of scenarios where, like, I just sit and program for 8 hours and I'm uninterrupted and can be totally in the zone. And so then the reality of that much programming is not as the dream of it is maybe more than the reality of it over time. And so I tend to have these like seasons where there are a season of coding, and I'll code for a couple of years or 18 months or whatever, and then I'll be like, okay, like we're kind of getting to that now where I'm sort of like, I do have some projects that I'll be coding probably most likely here soon, but they're a little tighter. They're not like Rebuild HelpSpot, which was my last thing I worked on, which was too big. Like, I shouldn't have been the one, like, not that I was gonna be the only one working on it, but I was gonna lay like kind of foundation, and just like bad idea from the start. Um, so I think it is, I'm trying to be more intentional about like, yes, there's certain aspects I can do. There's certain aspects, like one of the things we're doing once we decide not to rebuild HelpSpot was like modernize certain internal components.
Yeah.
Like, that's been fun. I've been off of that now for a little while because I'm like working on the website and doing other stuff. So I get distracted from it, but it's also not ultra time critical. So it's fine. I'll be back on it in a couple weeks. But that's like, yeah, I know HelpSpot internals really well. I can like go in there and hash and burn faster than probably anybody else could, who would have to like learn a lot of that stuff. So, but it's also like a pretty narrow scope. It's like, I'm gonna take this chunk and do it in a modern Laravel way. Um, but it's not all the way to like rebuilding the whole thing or building something new. So it's a more of a bite-sized chunk, and trying to be more intentional about that aspect of it. Um, so we'll see. That's where I'm at now with it, and I feel like I like it.
I have recently come to a new sort of mental model for things like this rebuild, where I used to beat myself up all the time for, starting things and not finishing them.
Yeah.
Um and like I have this image in my head that I've been trying to like get down as like a real graphic that I could share, because I think it would help. But like,
Yeah.
kind of have this idea of like a starting and a finish line that is linear somehow, right? When
Mhm.
when I look back at my experience, like, I think of it as much more like a upward spiral
All
where,
right.
like, sometimes I'll make a push towards something and then walk away from it and then come back to it and bring it further along and eventually finish it. And
Mm.
other times I'll make a push towards something and walk away from it forever, but like everything that I learned during that, informs something that
Yeah.
I do later, right? So I can't imagine that the work that you're doing now, modernizing the internals, isn't heavily informed by the time that you spent experimenting with a rewrite. And I would almost guarantee that it's better for it in pretty meaningful ways. You know what I mean? Like, I think thinking about these like starts and stops is just like, if you didn't ship something, it's a failure. Really, you know, is not the whole picture.
Yeah, this is, I mean, I definitely tell myself that, what you're saying. So, and I think it's true that I definitely learned a bunch of stuff. Um, it's kind of interesting because, ultimately it comes down to like the software is such a small part of most of these things.
Mhm.
Um, like the technology is there to rebuild it better and faster and stronger than it was originally built. But then, like, as you get into it, it's like, yeah, but there's all the business factors of like upheaving all the existing customers. And then, like, if you're going to do a radical change, you're going to lose customers probably on some level. I mean, we had some ideas to like soften the blow of that a bit. by letting them stay on the old platform and different things. But still, like, once you open that door, people can think about, oh, should I move to the new HelpSpot? Like, that's well, I should also think about, should I move to the Zendesk or to whoever else, right? So,
Yep. See Google Analytics.
right, exactly, all that kind of stuff. So once you open that door, people are going to reconsider their options. So that's always a stressful point. Even for the people who aren't considering that, are like, great, we just want the new thing. There's a whole application that's gigantic that would have to be built to like convert people. There's other models you could take. Well, okay, like, let's not mess with the data layer and kind of just build a new version that pretty much uses the existing data model in terms of like the actual database columns and things that are in the database. But that then super limits you like on the new things you would want to do, because a lot of the new stuff would be, let's restructure it and make it better. And now you're not really restructuring it. It's like, yeah, now I'm accessing it in a nicer way on the
Yeah.
Laravel side, which is nice, but isn't necessarily solving some of the deeper issues that I might want to fix with how things are modeled out and stuff. So yeah, so it ends up being complicated. And then I do think there's like, I don't know if you feel this. I definitely feel like an age factor where, like, as I get older, just my ability to want to handle so many different complicated things of dubious outcomes all simultaneously is like very much diminished. Like, I just don't have the energy for that. And it's like, is the upside of rocking the boat worth the downside of like the stress and aggravation and all
Oh,
that
for
stuff? Like,
sure.
so it's like, I don't know. Um, and there's just a lot of other stuff we have to do. There's like all this AI stuff, which is very big in customer service right now, at least, is kind of a hot topic. And it's like, we could be shipping AI features, which is kind of the stuff we're working on now, or we could be rebuilding the underpinnings so they're better. And obviously those things are related. And you're like, well, if it was structured differently, that would be nicer for other features. But then in the reality, of course, no customer cares about that. They just want you to
Right.
ship new features. So, okay, like, so taking a year to do all that just puts you a year behind on the features they actually want. So
Yeah.
yeah, so there's all those trade-offs in there, and all that is stressful. And on the topic of the podcast, like, you get into the burnout zone of, that's a lot of stuff to think about and juggle, and then you're not sure why you're doing it to begin with, to some degree.
Yeah. I actually want to jump onto a tangent for 1 second, which
Sure.
is, do you have customers that are asking for AI features? Is that like
Yeah,
that
we
people are
do.
asking for them? I can
Yeah,
see it in that space because I've just been, I don't know, I was just talking with my wife about this. I have yet to meet like a non-technical person who is excited about an AI feature in anything that they've used,
yeah.
and I just keep on wondering, is this something that anybody wants? Like,
Well, I think
as
if we got
programmers, we're so excited to like implement this cool new thing and it seems so
right.
exciting and the promise of it is so amazing. But
Yep.
like every time I see an AI feature in a product that I actually use, I'm like, oh, this is getting in the way of me actually doing the thing I want to do?
Yep. So it's a complicated question. I might be a little long-winded in the answer here, but for your audience, I think I can get down into some of the nitty-gritty here a
Go
little
for it.
bit. Um, there's a lot of layers there, right? So there's like, for normal people, they've actually already been using a ton of like big umbrella AI stuff. Like, your Spotify suggestions is like
Sure.
what we would have called machine learning 18 months ago is like under the AI banner now, right? But like, your Netflix queue, like all this stuff that people like, it shows them. Again, a lot of people listen to this podcast maybe don't like it because we're like devs and we're like, oh, we hate when we go to Netflix that like it just shoves a bunch of shit. It doesn't like finish the series I'm halfway through. It doesn't appear at the top. Instead, I get whatever new thing they're pushing, right, or whatever.
Yep.
But whatever, Netflix has data that says otherwise, that people like when they do that and shove a bunch of new shows in front of them instead. And so that's what they do. And they don't just write like a bunch of if statements, right? Like, they have a bunch of machine learning models that algorithmically figure this stuff out and give things to you personalized for you to some degree.
Yeah, I will say when I say AI, I mean specifically language model
Like the
stuff, right?
LLMs. Yeah.
Like
But so
that's
right,
the
so
piece.
I'm getting there. So
Okay,
like,
all
so
right, all
that is
right.
like AI stuff normies use every day and have used for a while now, right? So that's kind of where I'm going with the LLM is like, I think there will be things that they just use and they don't think about it like this is AI. It's just going to be stuff happens and it's cool. Like I think the best example of that so far has kind of been there's some beefs I have with the Apple keynote, but I think the way they're going about the Apple Intelligence stuff is kind of along these lines. It's like,
Yeah, for
let me
sure.
just fix that writing for you. It's right here. Let me pull in your contact information and this map you did and whatever, and realize that you're going over there and like give you a couple hints about that, or have it pre-set up in your, when you open your phone, it's like all ready to go because it knows you're going to go somewhere and where you're going and whatever. So like, I think the core day in, day out use is going to be much more that kind of thing. Um, and then it won't necessarily all be like, some of that stuff's still going to be like more traditional machine learning. Some of that will be LLMs. I think where our circles, I think it's like the LLMs was like such a cool thing of like, oh, I just shove any text I want and it gives me text back. And so I can quickly add this to anything because it's like, yeah, let's just shove
Yeah,
some text in it and it gives us text back. And so it takes longer to figure out other types of things to build with that technology than just fix my writing type of things, which everybody added quickly. We added that quickly. Like, yeah, whatever. If you're an agent and you want to like have ChatGPT clean up your writing, great. Like it does that now in HelpSpot. But so there's that. There's also like, this is probably going to become the API, I would say, for most medium-sized businesses and below to do what in the past big companies just did with training machine learning models custom. That this will be our level of ability. Like we probably can't financially build a custom model. So we are going to use the LLM and leverage its abilities to do equivalent features that are still seamless. So like this is kind of stuff we're more working on is like, how can we route a ticket to the right place or category or agent? Um, So it's not like you're going to see any writing. You're not going to know that like LLM was involved. It's just a thing that happens
sure.
inside the tool, right? And so, but those things all take more time than just, hey, I see that my app has a text area and now I can like do stuff in that text area. Like that's a different type of thing. But yeah, I do think like in day-to-day use, I don't know. Like, I think it's probably gonna be a thing that you use more at work. Is it gonna be like in your home as much as people might think it will be now? Maybe not. Um, some areas lend themselves to it more than others, like customer service. People at least see the potential of the idea, right? Like, I have 100 agents. In certain companies, those 100 agents, like it's the 80/20. It's like 80% of their support is 5 questions. It's the same
Yeah,
5
sure.
questions over and over, right? So
Yep.
can you reduce your headcount by answering those 5 questions, even just those 5 in a really good automated way? Probably, right? And so there's an impetus there. That's not actually the kind of customer HubSpot has very many of. Um, for the most part, it's a little bit more complicated scenarios, most HubSpot customers. So I think there is still a chance to reduce people's tickets by some percentage, but I don't think it's going to be like when you see like there was a big article months back about Klarna, who's one of these like, you know, pay over time type services, and they whatever, like reduce their agents by 70%. But they're also the kind of service that's like they probably have 5 questions like, how do I, return an item? How do I
Right.
pay this off? How do I get a loan to buy an item? Whatever. There's like literally a handful of things because all they do is kind of this one service, and it's fairly straightforward. Like, how do I pay my bill? They're going to get a lot of those really consumery kind of straightforward questions,
I
but a lot of
still
places aren't like that.
I still though wonder like, is the customer experience at Klarna good now?
Right.
I bet you it's not.
Oh,
You know?
yeah. So I think that's a whole other fascinating area. Again, if you deal with like somewhat smaller companies like we do, there tends to be a little more, let's say, care
Yeah,
about
for sure.
customer service, right? Or we're trying to use that as a differentiator, use that as a valuable contact point. But there are not all companies view it that way, right? Like if I was hiring bad agents and I was training them poorly and I was throwing them into the meat grinder to answer my 5 questions that I have to answer over and over, I think the bar there is pretty low on, is the AI going to do a better job, like, or at least
Right.
an
Sure.
equivalent job, right? Whereas, like, yes, if I have a highly trained agent who really knows my products well and the questions are more complex, then the AI is probably going to do a pretty bad job there. And I think for the foreseeable future, like, I don't think the AI, kind of feel like what we have with LLMs is what we're getting.
Yeah.
And they'll get better at writing stuff, and maybe they'll get better at categorizing and tasks. But I don't think it's, I think all this like AGI or whatever is kind of,
There's no intelligence is the
yeah, I
problem,
just think
right?
that it still only knows what you fed into it, and you can only feed so much into it, and
And it doesn't even. I
yeah.
mean, I I was talking with Daniel Culver and a while ago, and he was just like talking about how amazing it was to be able to just like throw a document into ChatGPT and then like have a audio conversation with ChatGPT about the document.
Mm,
So I tried it. I was going to a board meeting for the kids' school, and it's a Waldorf school, which, if you don't know, is typically fairly conservative about technology. There's no technology in the classrooms or anything
yeah.
like that. And I asked, I just asked for like a brief summary of this document, and it starts going on and on about like introducing, screens and the like projectors into each classroom and giving everyone
Right.
tablets. And I went so far as to say, can you quote the exact paragraph in the document that says this? And it happily just gives me back, it gives me back a
Something,
quote, with
right?
quotation marks around it. Um, and I went in because I was like, I am fairly certain that this set of recommendations is not actually in this document. And
Yep,
it's completely fabricated.
that's
Um,
crazy.
so I don't know. I have so much. I think that the problem with LLMs is they show so much promise, but I don't think the technology has the capacity to reach what we imagine it will someday be. I think we need totally different solutions to these problems to get there. And so everyone's sort of building on this premise that someday it's going to get to this place that we see the potential for. And I just don't buy that it will. But
That's definitely the market move, right? Of like people trying to raise money. It's like, let me
yeah,
sell you the dream of
yeah,
everything's automated, and yeah.
yeah. Because it's so cool, right? It's
Yeah.
it's very cool to see. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
All
this is
right.
why
This
we
is
haven't, like, gotten too far into it with HubSpot yet, and then what we're doing is mm, safer stuff to start, let's put it that way, of, like,
yeah,
if it miscategorizes something, you'll be annoyed, but it's not like it told your customer a completely wrong answer. Um,
right.
because, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there are, again, this is where it comes into different type of companies, like, let's say, I'm just making this up, don't sue me, but like a Klarna, let's say like 10% of the first time the agent answered, they got it wrong, like human agents.
Hmm.
Well, like, if you're willing to accept that level of wrongness, then the AI is probably going to be able to get you in the ballpark, and it's not a big trade off. But like a lot of companies are like, no, I don't want, even like a few percent is unacceptable. Well,
Right.
in that, like, we know the LM's probably not, it's gonna have a hard time getting that accurate a lot of times, or it's gonna insert something subtly incorrect and make the customer mad. And what's the, yes, you're saving money on agents, but what's the cost to you when customers get mad and leave because they had bad experiences with support? So there's a lot of trade-offs there. How wrong the LLM can be and what your acceptability for that is very important factors
Yeah, for
in
sure.
that equation.
All right, we'll have to do a third part,
Oh boy.
episode 3 on
The
LLMs because
AI.
I want to get back onto topic.
All right.
Um, but I could talk about this for a long time. Um, something that I had been thinking about, or I think another part of this sort of work that I've done over the last few years, to get back into this place of being a programmer, is focusing a lot more on open source. And I'm
Mm,
curious, I feel like you are so engaged with the open source community and you're like the godfather of Laravel, all that,
right.
right?
Yeah,
Do you do much open source work yourself? I don't really
no.
know.
I have a few things out there from forever ago, but not much at all. And I guess I've always approached it more as like my what I can give there is something different than code. Like that, the people doing the code are better coders than me. Like Taylor's a 10 times better coder than I am, and like my package is not going to be that additive compared to what other people can do. So, but maybe I can be impactful in other ways, help the community with a Laracon or Larajobs, or like I was taking on more the business end. Like, how can we make this sustainable has been more my interest
Yeah.
than the actual let me code it up and ship some code. So yeah, that's kind of been my take on it.
For me, I mean, I don't know if I am contributing back or not, but I do find that um, giving myself space to work on open source is a way to sort of counteract what we were talking about earlier, where on a more mature project, you're working on
Yeah,
more just bug fixes and small improvements where if you are just working on an open source package, you can kind of find a problem and try to solve it,
right.
and even if it's only just to have done it, and not particularly useful for other people, I do find that that's like a really useful creative outlet for myself. Is just like,
Mm,
yeah, sometimes we my other dev team members will joke that sometimes I just like disappear for 2 days and come
right.
back with like a new open source package that I wrote.
Yep.
And usually it's something that's useful for us, and I think is good for the world, I guess. But
Yep.
a lot of it is just I need to get away and do something creative for a little while. Um, so that I don't know, that feels like it's helpful.
I
Um,
think for me, I guess the sort of tricky part with that kind of thing is like I've definitely done that myself, not with open source, but with well, I'll have another side project in addition to obviously working on HubSpot.
Yeah.
I do think from a burnout perspective, I don't love it. And this will be different for different people. Some people are rejuvenated by that, but I do think like more, it's like just more screen time. It's like more of the same kind of thing. And it's not getting me away from it. So I guess that's where I find it's not restorative. And this might be specific to me, but I have a very hard time. This is part of the open source issue too. So that was a good question because I tend to come at even though I'd like the like creativity and art of software, I also tend to just think about it always from a business perspective. So like
mhm.
if I'm gonna be motivated to write something, a new piece of code, like it's gonna be like, how do I make a business out of this? How do I sell this? Like that's gonna be my angle with it. So even my like side hobby thing will be like, but how do I do something businessy with this? And so that also then brings on for me, it's like not just the code and it's fun coding on it, but it's like, well, I have to like get a domain and I have to like get how are we going to sell it and what's the market and like I start thinking about businessy stuff and that all obviously then weighs down on top of the existing actual business that actually pays for everything. So yeah, for me it's never been like restorative in that like I want it to be, but it tends to not be because of those kind of it
Yeah.
becomes a second business, even though it's not selling anything. It's just, but it's in my mind, it's like a second business, and so yeah, it's just more weight.
I get that. Yeah, I think um for me, I do think about it from a business perspective, but I think about it more uh for us, the biggest challenge around the software side of things is hiring, right? Like
Yeah,
finding good people who are like a good fit for the team, who are going to stay around for a long time, and who are good developers is hard, right? I think it's hard for
yeah,
everybody, and I know that Adam has been talking about this recently, and Taylor's been talking about it recently. Just the inundation of terrible applications
yes,
is so hard.
yeah,
Um, and I think that for me, I've put a lot of my tension into open source with this mindset of um I want to get like good code that's associated with me and the organization out there,
Mm,
so that when people uh like when we are hiring, there's a better chance that someone who I would like to hire has maybe interacted with it a little
yeah,
bit, or used something that we've put out there, um and that's been really helpful so far, as theoretically, it's one
right.
for one, at least most recently.
Yeah, I
um
think all that stuff sort of as marketing, if you will, even though what you're marketing is your organization and how it works internally, right, is all good stuff. And I think for me, I've done the same thing, but it's just from a different angle, right? It's like
right.
people know me now because I ran the online conference and the job
Yeah.
board and whatever. So that's sort of my angle with that. It's like just getting in front of people to know that we're an organization that uses this tool that they like and that is in the community, and you're going to be maybe a little more well known if you work here than if you work somewhere else where you're kind of in the Borg down in the basement somewhere and you're responsible
Yeah.
for your little section of some giant Laravel app. So yeah, so I think that's a really good way to get. No, I mean, there's so many advantages. We have to go into every advantage of doing open source, but that's definitely an advantage, is getting your name out there in one way or the other, and getting people to recognize you. It's definitely
Yeah.
how I've hired people.
So I want to go all the way back. I think that um sort of the place where the idea of this conversation first started for me actually is,
Mm,
I can't remember when it was. I assume it must have been on Mostly Technical. You said something about uh a friend or somewhere you had read that, like, uh in an ideal world, founders would be able to take a year off every 5 years or something like that.
yeah, I knew somebody had once let me know about this founder, and it was like some physical world company. This is years ago, where the guy takes every fifth year completely off.
Um and I remember just hearing that and just thinking, "Oh my god, can you imagine?"
Yeah, that would be
Just
pretty awesome.
like, it just gave me this, like, very deep feeling of, like, what would it be like to come back after that year?
Yeah,
Because, you'd be hungry to work again, right?
yeah,
Because I bet you by the end of it, you're kinda sick of
yep,
not working.
yep.
But also, like, I don't know about you, but I definitely find, after having kids, as I'm getting older, paying attention to my physical health is harder for me.
Mm,
Um, and just making time for it. I mean, sort of what you were talking about in the very beginning. I don't buy the whole like work life balance dichotomy, because I don't think that that's quite nuanced enough. But there's this sort of model that I heard about through CGP Grey, which is
mm,
the four light bulbs, which is essentially like, you have your work, you have your relationships, you have your health, um, and you have your family, right? These are the four big categories, and you've got four light bulbs and 100 watts, and like, you can't light all four light bulbs to full brightness.
yeah,
Like, there's just not enough energy to do that.
yeah,
So you have to be, like, thoughtful, or, sort of realistic about what you're putting energy into. And I think, I know when I there have been times in my life when that's been really helpful to kind of say, you know what, I'm going to really intentionally, like, just not focus on my, like, physical health or my, like, friendships for a while, because, like, we just had a baby and I just, like, got sort of took on a bigger role at work. Like, work
yeah,
and family just need 100% right now. Um and other times where that balance has been different, but I definitely find myself thinking, like, I can't make the space for some of this health stuff. And I imagine that, a couple weeks of not working and not really doing other stuff would start to open up space to be like, oh, maybe I can like make it
Right.
to the yoga studio or start taking classes or whatever it might be. Like
Yeah.
that's a big element of it for me as well. Um
Yeah. I mean, these jobs that I mean, I always thought that was amazing, and I've never been able to get to that spot, which is definitely a regret. I would have liked to have maybe found a way to make that work, but we just never got big enough to really execute that. And it is hard because I think it's like a nice structure for like, and obviously maybe you can just do it for shorter amounts of time. I have taken big trips and things that were several months, but I never thought about it as a recurring thing.
mhm.
But there is something to the idea of recurringness of it. First of all, that's 5 years. It's like I'm thinking long term. Like I'm gonna have this business in 25 years, right? Because these are five. It's not like every other year. It's like 5 year chunks. Okay, and then I'm
Yeah.
gonna push hard for 4 years, and I'm gonna take a year off. And there's like a nice element to that. I think it would definitely be restorative. It does would force you into some other. I do think the problem with like a vacation in our world is that like you're gone for a week, but you're barely gone. Like things are pinging you, things are notifying you. People have questions, you're answering them because it's not 1954 when you were on a vacation. You were really on a vacation, and there's literally no way for anybody to get a hold of you. And how like amazing that must have been. In some ways, obviously, there's downsides to not having instant communication, but there are some upsides to it as well, where you could actually be at least mostly unplugged, which is very
Yeah.
difficult now, even if you take a couple weeks off or whatever. So, yeah, but that even kind of gets into your other part of the topics of like maybe when you take a 2 week vacation, you should just force yourself to unplug. Like you have to be more assertive about it, right? And be like,
Right.
I'm going to do this and really go to the yoga studio 3 days a week and start building the habit so that even when I come back, I can continue it, for
Right.
example.
Right.
And like the same thing with like Twitter or social media or things like that. Like, we have to be more, it's not going to happen for us anymore in the way it used to. You may have to be more
Right.
proactive, you know?
Yeah, I mean, but I do think that there's a difference between a vacation and something like a sabbatical,
Yeah,
right?
there
Vacation
is.
has certain expectations, right? You kind of trade work for the work of relaxing
Right.
as or of like, exploring or whatever type of vacation is you're doing.
Right.
But there's like a doing element, even if that doing is like laying on the beach. It's still like you
Right.
kind of have an agenda, right?
Yeah.
And there's some expectation that like, oh, you're going to be gone for a week and all of a sudden you'll be like rejuvenated.
Right.
But that's not usually my experience. Now, I love
Right.
to take a vacation, but I love to do it because, you know, I like to spend time with my kids by the beach,
Right.
and dig sandcastles
Yeah.
and
There's
all that stuff. Like,
planning. There's
yeah,
all that
there's a
stuff.
lot of
There's
work
work
to it,
with it. Yeah.
especially
There's a ton of
with
work.
kids. Yeah.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, sabbatical
whereas,
working backwards from a sabbatical, you're gonna change the whole structure of your business. Like, how do I structure my business so that I can literally not be here? Like, you're not gonna structure your business in a way to support you going on a 2 week vacation, but you are
right.
gonna structure it so that you can literally be gone a year. Like, that means very different things about what has to
Yeah.
be in place.
I think about with the kids, there's a lot of like what the value of being bored, that like kind of concept.
Yeah,
And in some ways I think about it in the same light. It's like I almost feel like, yeah, I need some time to be like legitimately bored.
right. Yeah,
Like
it's hard now.
it's hard. It's funny how that is, but yeah. Well, so when we were talking about this, I texted you before and I said, maybe Twitter is not so bad.
Right.
And then also, there's this whole discourse, how Twitter, the Brent is leaving Twitter. There's a lot of conversation about Twitter. Uh, I do want to get into that for a second. My Twitter is maybe not bad take
Mm,
is certainly over the pandemic
mhm,
and even now, the number of relationships that I made over Twitter, right, that have turned into, at the very least, Telegram chats, or, seeing people from time to time, uh, or just going to Laracon and like having people that I know and recognize and like am happy to see.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's been immensely valuable to me. And I think it was really valuable during the pandemic when, you know, we were locked at home, to
Right.
have like a community of people to kind of call on. And, I think that things like this podcast and um just a bunch of things that have gotten me uh in touch with new people, you know, made new friends, uh built new social relationships, whether it extends to the degree of like a friendship that's like regular interaction, but just like I think that there's been a lot that's been really positive there.
Mm.
Um and so while I get everyone's I also am feeling all the other sides of social media. Um and I think that like, what Brent said in his post about just like that sort of compulsion to go see what's going on real quick before you do whatever's next. Like,
Yeah.
it's obviously not great.
Right. Right. Definitely
um,
not helping your productivity for sure.
yeah, but at the same time, you know, it's like I don't want to walk away because I am continuing to build new like real connections with real people via Twitter.
Yeah.
Um And I think part of that for me has been I'm very, very aggressive about unfollowing or muting. Like, so I don't really see any of the like, I really don't see much of the stuff that a lot of folks are complaining about around like, the SEO scammers, or
Mm.
just like um, the audience building nonsense.
Hmm.
Um, and maybe that means I miss out on, finding new people to engage with. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of potential value there, um, that I would miss. I don't know if that resonates for you.
Yeah. I think there's like a continuum, right? There's like in terms of, and it also depends on your goals and things like that. I mean, for me, I think if you're like the founder of a software company, the economic value is very close to zero at the best case, and likely negative is the most likely scenario. Just in dollars and cents, I think it's negative for almost every software founder. There is yeah, obviously there's counterexamples. You're selling some kind of social media tool, whatever, right? Fine. Or if you're a content creator, if you're Aaron is in a different spot where he's trying to sell courses and the people are on Twitter and you got to market to the people, right? So like that's different. But if you're a software founder, I feel like what the amount of business you get is literally zero, especially in B2B software. And then like, so every distraction is just like a negative on things you should probably be doing other than being distracted. Now, that's not the whole picture. There is, of course, like what you're saying with like friendships and staying in touch with people and meeting new people. That's like, I think it's hard to judge. I think there's definitely people I met, like I'm on here and I didn't know you before and I wouldn't know you without Twitter, most likely. But I don't know. I don't know. Is that even true? Like in the old, like I have a podcast with Aaron. You might have reached out to me and said, "Hey, be on my podcast," and I might have met you that way. So, I mean, these things happened before Twitter existed, right? Like it wasn't impossible to do these things. It was different. So I don't know. I'm not going all the way probably to zero social media under any circumstances, but I do feel like the amount of time spent on it is not good. Especially in coding and really any work. Like once you go in there, like you can't help but be distracted. Like you are now distracted, and then when you come back, you're just not as productive as you were before you went in there. Like, and then you got to get back in the groove and whatever. And I do think it's gotten much worse. See, I'm not a big unfollower and blocker and all that stuff, like a muter. Like to me, that's a lot of work. Now I'm putting in all this work And especially since it's algorithmically driven, I mean, there's infinite people. So like I'm blocking people and then it's just showing new people to me who do the same thing, right? So it's like a limited value. I mean, yeah, I could block Elon because he's a huge one, and I could block a couple other big names that appear all the time, but there's only so much blocking and muting I can really do. I could stick only with the follower tab or following tab, but that kind of also hurts me because it's like I want the algorithm to tell me what I missed so I don't have to necessarily read a day of tweets when I come back. But then I go over there and there's a bunch of other stuff in there. It's not just like the 6 or 7 things that if I went through and handpicked are the things that I would want to see, because obviously its goals, incentives are not aligned with that, right? Like they don't want you to read 6 items and get out of there. They want you to spend half an hour reading, random crypto stuff and whatever. And literally
Don't say that word. The bots are going to come.
the same Sam Parr ad 4,000 times. Like every 3 tweets, I got to see the same ad. So I don't know. This is not a finished project for me. Like I've been negative on Twitter for a while, but I haven't taken action, and I'm new to the action this last couple weeks, but I do like it so far, I think. Devaluing it from my day to day.
So you said you tried Mastodon and you just didn't like it. What was that experience?
I mean, I tried it when Elon bought Twitter and everybody kind of was like, all right, let's go to Mastodon. And it's just kind of a mess. Like the way you connect people is kind of messy. I don't know if any of it's better. Maybe it is. I do like the idea. Obviously, like some of the things like ads and stuff like that, you're presumably not going to have that problem. I don't know if that works on different servers. I don't know. I mean, it's a solution for tech Twitter, maybe because they're technical enough for it. I don't think you're ever going to get normal people on there too much. And to me, that's like a huge part of the value of Twitter is not just like all the geeks are still here because the geeks are still here. And it's like, okay, we're all still here and we're trying to hang on. But I like Twitter for all the other stuff too. Like I like that there was news people I followed and other travel related things or whatever. And like when those things were a little bit not just totally garbage on Twitter, right? Like that was interesting.
Yeah.
But now it's like, okay, everything else is garbage. And tech Twitter is like not totally garbage yet. And tech Twitter thinks that because they're not totally garbage yet, that like the garbage isn't coming for them. But it is coming because everything else is wrecked. If you go into any other part of Twitter, you're like, oh my God, what's going on over here? So can they all move to can we move tech Twitter to Mastodon? Maybe, but it's just going to be tech Twitter over there. It's not going to be journalists, not going to be travel thing. It's just going to be tech people, which is fine. But I also feel like there's so many other options for that now. I'm in 6 Telegram groups with tech people. I got Slack. Like some of this stuff is peeling off into other spaces too. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I do wish I definitely find myself in Telegram more often now, but I don't love that it's like totally private. There's something that was really nice about Twitter being like this public space that you could kind of like find interesting things that were happening. And I like that Mastodon has that capacity. I also think that the thing that I'm most interested in with Mastodon is, if we could get a critical mass of just Laravel folks onto one instance, all of a sudden you have like not only are there the people that you follow, but there's the sort of instance view where you can like switch over and just see what's everybody on the instance talking about. And as long as you keep that, like, you don't just like open the floodgates to everybody, there's some sort of like process of
So
bringing
you're just
people into the
rebuilding
instance.
Telegram, though, really, to some degree. Like you could have a Laravel Telegram group that's like vetted Laravel-y people.
No, because it's still public. It can still
Telegram can be public.
Engage with the rest of the like Fediverse.
But then I have
as
to
much
be
as you want.
I have to be like my whole identity is Laravel.
No, not at all.
Because that's where that's like my home instance. Isn't that how that works? I mean, I could
Well,
have a second account for
you could have a
different
second
instances.
account if you wanted to, but no, I mean a lot of folks join an instance that's like topical or regional or something like that. And because of that, they're going to their posts are going to tend to veer in that direction, but they don't there's nothing forcing you to.
No, I
And
understand
like,
that, but I mean, it is, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like if I start tweeting about I start whatever they call it, Mastodon, about any other topic, right? And you're in the view of the server and you're like, I'm on this server for Laravel stuff. And there is Ian posting about politics or travel stuff or how he went on a walk this morning. Like that's all now not Laravel specific.
yeah,
You know what I'm
I'm not
saying?
too worried about that. I feel like because then I could just mute you if I wanted to.
Yeah. But I just think
Um,
it's not gonna happen.
yeah.
I just think it's not gonna happen
I mean, it doesn't
because I
seem
just
like
don't
it's going
think
to happen.
I just don't think anybody wants to be pigeonholed on that level. It's like really committing to like this one slice of my identity is what this is. And that feels like anti Twitter to me.
Yeah, that's interesting that you see it that way because I don't just because I'm on like a instance that has a focus doesn't I mean, I don't feel any obligation to stay technical in my posts.
Yeah. I mean, I get that, but I just think it is creating I still think there's no way around it creating that sort of if that's the goal, right? It's like we're building Laravel servers, so all the Laravel people are there with their main accounts, so we're all together. I just think that is putting a very, in this case, Laravel, it could be anything dynamic on it. Like, what if I'm not
Yeah.
involved in Laravel in 5 years, and now my home instance and my handle is this thing connected to this Laravel instance that I'm
Well, you
not a
can
part of anymore?
move. You
Can
can
you move?
move and you can bring all your followers with you. So
Mm,
you can shift because we already when we first started the current experiment, um I bought any.dev, and we were going to go all big, but it
mhm,
was a premium domain. And after a year of being like, okay, it doesn't seem like this is going to take off in the way that we were hoping. I was just like, I'm not going to pay premium domain prices for
right.
just like this little side experiment.
Mm.
Um, and so we
So
just we migrated over to artisan.dev, rtsn.dev, and it was seamless. I think Matt is probably the biggest account there, and he moved some significant number of followers, and it was fine. I had like 100 people to move over. Like,
but I mean, even
um,
that, it's kinda crazy, like, all right, this is my instance, I'm at Ian at any.dev, right? And, like, now my instance can just change its URL and, like, I'm somewhere else, or I have to physically move, or else I just get lost, like, that just I don't know. I'm
I
not
don't know.
buying
I
it,
like
like,
I like that.
I'm not
It's
buying it.
it gives you that flexibility to say, okay, I'm committing to this instance for now,
Yeah, but I'm
but
just dependent on you, literally you, right? Like, and nothing wrong
sure,
with you, but
yeah, no,
like
you have to
you
trust
get
me
hit
for
by a
sure.
bus. Anything can happen. Now I'm on this dead instance I put all this time and energy into, and now it's dead,
Yep,
right? And so I don't see. I mean, listen, I think it's going to have its little niches and whatever. I'm not saying it's going to go away, but I just don't think it's going to replace Twitter. Like
yeah,
everything you've described is so complicated and so anti like how a normal person uses the internet and would be willing to do when they can just go to Twitter, go to Threads, go to Facebook, go to any Instagram and just sign up and use it and have it forever and know it's never going to change. It's always going to work. They don't have to think about it. And I like the normal people there. See, everybody's like tech Twitter, great, but I like that the normal people used to be in there. And now the normal people are gone. But like I used to like that there was normal people in the mix, and there isn't anymore for the most part.
I
There's
will
just
say
tech
there are a
Twitter
lot
and like
of
some scammery type people. Like that's where we're at. That's what's left.
there are a lot of people on like I find that I don't follow a huge tech contingent on Mastodon because most of the people who I care about just aren't there. But there is a lot of activity, and you can find those like nichey things in a way in the same way that you used to. You can find
Yeah,
travel people or you
Usenet
can
or
news
whatever.
people
Yeah.
or whatever. And like a lot of news outlets now run their own instances, so you can like confirm that this is actually like that reporter
Yeah.
because it's at, you know, msnbc.com or whatever, you know, like,
Yeah.
um, so I do think that that's there. I think you're right. Like it's always going to be a nerdy thing,
Yeah.
but I guess my feeling is just like right now tech Twitter is the only good Twitter, and I do think that it's gotten worse over the last, even over the last like 2 weeks. It feels
Like,
like
literally, yeah,
Twitter
like, it
has
gets
been
worse
getting
every week.
bad.
It does, it's
Um
worse every week.
and so my mentality is just like, even if it's only to preserve a semblance of what we already have, I'd rather do that than nothing. And then
Yeah.
we have like a little safe haven of sorts.
Maybe it was
Um
all maybe it's like maybe it's just more the signal though. How I'm taking it is it's just a signal to be on there less, right? Like, it's just less. It's a not good. You're not being it's not making you more productive. You don't need that many more new friends. And what you're getting out of it isn't maybe as much as you might think if you really sit down and list it out. Like that, it's all a continuum again. Like, if you're a little more well known, I think it gets less and less interesting. I think then all the way at the other end, it's like, I don't really know anybody in this community. Then yes, like there's a lot of value potentially if you can start to connect with people. Um,
yeah, I
I
get
don't
that.
know. But I mean, it's
No,
like,
I
look
get
at
it.
like how often does Taylor tweet? How often does Adam Wathan tweet? How often, all of the big names in our community, if you go back and compare how much they tweet now versus like 2 years ago, it's not even close. Like,
Oh yeah, for
literally
sure.
a tenth, right? So I just think that's like kind of what's happening. Like, they felt it maybe earlier. I'm just like, I don't know how they feel about it. I'm speaking just my own, just by what's going on, just by the data I have of like, are they on there getting in the streets or not? They are not, right? So,
Yeah.
um, why is that, right? I don't know. I think there's something to do with how it's gone, how much fun it is to be on there, how useful it is to them and their interactions and their businesses. Uh, Yeah, and I think that just is trickling down to, like, the littler fish like myself as we, get in there. It's like, I don't know. I'm not getting any economic value. The interpersonal value is, like, diminishing because it's mixed in with all these, like, bots and human bots, I just call them on Twitter because, like, they're just Elon turned the humans into bots, where everybody's just tweeting these one-liners and whatever, and so, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Mental
No,
health
I
wise, I don't think it's an upside. I can't imagine it's a positive. I just really can't. Like, I think it's just
yeah.
unlikely overall. Like, if you really add it up, like, yes, I met these cool people and there's a couple cool people, but like then the day in, day out grind of seeing bad stuff or seeing stuff. I mean, just like kids have. Everybody talks about it in terms of kids, but like even for adults, like I get sad sometimes when I'm on there. It's like, oh, person who started a software company the same time I did is taking a year sabbatical and has a yacht, right? Like, oh man, I like really screwed that up, even though I've done well and whatever. Like, if you asked me when I started, if I was like, this is the end, how do you feel about that? I've been like, yes, sign me up, awesome. But you know, then you see somebody who's done it better, right? In a sense. So I don't know. I don't know if that's motivating. I think it gets like,
Oh no. I don't
all
think so.
that stuff. I think it's demotivating for most
Yeah.
people.
Oh, I agree for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah. I don't disagree with most of it. I think I do think that for me, um like, you know, we had our first PHP Philly meetup last month,
Yeah.
and uh a couple of those people wouldn't have been there had it not been for Twitter. And I think I am really glad to have met a few other Laravel PHP developers in the city. I probably wouldn't have gone to the PHP New York meetup had it not been for Twitter. And like, there are a couple people that I've like really connected with
Do you think that's
because of
true?
that.
See, I'm really am not
How would I have found
buying
about
those
it?
takes because here's the thing, meetup.com was way before Twitter.
None of
And
that stuff is on Meetup. It's a
I understand,
hellhole.
but like for sure, but like I just think that I went to plenty of conferences and plenty of meetups. I went to way more meetups, either before Twitter or, kind of essentially before Twitter,
Yeah.
very early days, than I do now. And like, there's obviously life reasons for that and stuff too. But I just think we found out about things like people had blogs or they had forums they were part of. There were still other means people found out about things. So I think Twitter's harder for me, I think, to replace on terms of like real time
Yeah,
information. Like,
for sure.
there's nothing has replaced Twitter in terms of just raw. There's something going on in the world, or even in tech, and to be able to be hooked into it real time is still cool and magical. And nothing is better than Twitter for that.
Yeah.
But I think these other sort of things, like maybe right now, it would be hard to do the Philly PHP meetup because Twitter is still kind of like the core. But I don't think that has to be true to make a Philly PHP meetup happen. I think it could happen other ways, potentially. I think it did
Yeah.
used to happen, and I
No,
feel like
I
there was more
agree.
meetups. There was more meetups before. Like,
Oh,
there was
for
tons of
sure.
PHP meetups and stuff, and that all that stuff kinda died off. I think as PHP kind of, went down a little bit, and then, like, the resurgence of Laravel is kind of, starting to pull it up, build up some of that interest in the community, I think, but
I think the meetup culture in general disappeared for a while, and
yeah.
I'm hoping that we're seeing a resurgence. I don't know, but it feels like we may be. But yeah, I think that you're not. I think that you're right that there used to be great ways to find local events. And if those still existed, I would agree with you entirely. It's just like
Right.
that stuff doesn't
Yeah.
exist
Yeah,
now.
I don't write on
There
my
aren't
blog, right? Like,
forums.
nobody
There are
does.
I'm like one of the very few, I when I texted you that thing about Brent, it was from my RSS feed reader. Like
Oh,
I try
wow.
really hard to find like RSS
Yeah,
feeds to subscribe to because I
yeah,
want that to still
be a
exist. And
thing.
there are some great blogs that publish. Um
How is that not? I feel like there is this middle ground between Twitter and blogs that nobody's been able to nail down that feels very logical to me, that somebody's gonna figure that out, and that's gonna be, like, the perfect middle ground of, like, you're required in some way to be maybe a little more thoughtful, or at least that's the expectation. It's not just, like, every just continuous firing from the hip, random one-liners, right? But, like, Um, so it's not so just the quantity's less in a sense. There's just like it's more thoughtful what's put out, but it's not the full commitment of like write a post
yeah.
and all of that, which people feel like they don't have time for now and or are just trained to expect, you know, something that happens quicker and
Yeah.
is easier. So I don't know.
I think that that's what Mastodon was supposed to be. I mean,
Really?
it
I think
may
it was more
not.
just like a Twitter clone, no?
Well, I mean, or maybe not Mastodon, but ActivityPub, the
Is that
protocol
like the
that Mastodon
protocol? Mm,
operates on top of. I mean, it's fascinating, the whole technology behind this stuff, and I do think that there are opportunities to um tap into that like ecosystem with tools that aren't Mastodon, but you would still, yeah, already that's happening. Like WordPress, you can have people comment on your posts via the Fediverse, and your posts can
right.
be posts on the Fediverse. And like,
Mm,
um, what is the Tumblr now is federated, so like if you
mm.
use Tumblr, you can, your posts are available in Mastodon or any other one of
Tumblr
those.
itself was kinda similar to what I'm talking about, I feel like. It was,
Yeah,
like,
it
kinda
was.
more along those lines,
Yeah, it just kind of
yeah,
fell apart for a while there,
yeah,
and now they're trying to come back, but who knows if
right.
they can.
They got the domain anyway.
Yeah, but, yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that's my biggest takeaway on the social media thing is, like, I agree that Twitter is not good anymore, good for people for the most part, but there's not an
No good
obvious
replacement.
place
Yeah,
that people can agree on. Like
right.
I think the Mastodon's great. I would everyone out there join artisan.dev.
Yeah,
We've got
I'll check it
some
out.
folks over here, but it's kind of a chicken and the egg. Most of us don't
Yeah,
post over there because most of us don't post over there.
yeah.
Um But if we can get enough folks over, maybe that would change. I'm not a huge fan of threads. I don't want to jump from like one evil social
Yeah,
media company to another evil social media company. Um, so and Blue Sky kind of meh
yeah.
doesn't excite me.
Care
The,
about
you
Blue
know,
Sky.
um,
I like Threads
at-
the best of the alternatives, but I agree. Like, I mean, it doesn't feel like I think Facebook would be a much better caretaker of the whole thing overall, but not without, of course, serious downsides compared to like the open blogging or things like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the upside of Threads is it's federated. I can, if you're on Threads, I can follow you on Mastodon.
Oh, did they actually do all that stuff? Okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know. I know that some accounts have access to it. I don't know if it's
Mm,
general access yet. I'll have to check. But you know, they're theoretically
playing in the sandbox
using
there.
the same activity protocol as Mastodon does,
Mm.
and as Tumblr and WordPress, like all of them are theoretically
Oh, maybe it's
cross
getting there.
compatible.
It's
Yeah,
getting there.
it's just basically JSON email. Like when you get
Right.
to the underlying technology, you basically have an
I
inbox
like
and
the
an
sound of that.
outbox, and it's
Yeah.
just JSON. You know, like that's all
Mm,
it is.
yeah.
With some like webhooks for real
Mm,
time notification. Like it's actually not complicated at all.
yeah.
And I think that there are some interesting. I think there's some interesting business opportunities there actually, but
Hmm.
um, I don't know. Anyway, I know that you need to head out soon.
Yeah.
Is there any chance you're going to get to take a sabbatical someday? What do you
Not
think?
anytime soon. We got a bunch of stuff we're doing, but it's on my list of things to possibly accomplish at some point, or if not, the thing I like to start with, like I always say, I'm gonna like make the summer relaxing. Like I'm gonna organize everything so that
Hmm.
like the summers can be at least like more chill.
Yeah.
I've never honestly like it always works out where the summer is the least chill of the whole year. And like that I have all these big projects and things that we're doing over the summer. So we'll see. I don't know. I don't have any near-term plans to take a proper sabbatical, but yeah, I am trying to focus more on taking different like one of the things we decided to do is not take any we usually do take some big vacations, and we're not doing that this year, and definitely part of it is because of what you were saying, like it's like the work of the vacation is a lot, and so it's
Yeah.
like we're just gonna be like home and chilling. Maybe over the winter we might go somewhere where there's some sun for like an easy
Yeah.
beach vacation without like a bunch of historical stops and planning and whatever, just like
Right.
fly there, sit on the beach, come back. But yeah, I keep it pretty low key for a year or so, I think. So that's kind of the near term stuff for me.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. I'm like actively trying to figure out how I could make it happen. Like I've got and the I have the advantage of, I've got 30 people working at InternetChy, so
Yeah.
there's a lot more opportunity to delegate. Um, and for the most part, I feel like all the teams, you know, are just firing on all cylinders. There's not a whole lot I have to deal with. I could probably walk away from most things. The only thing that, ironically, I feel like I would have trouble walking away from right now is the development side because, like,
Mm,
I I'm so like
we're still in the mix there.
yeah, I'm just like it's like my baby, right?
Yeah.
I worked on this thing by myself for probably a decade,
Right.
and then I brought on one developer and he worked on it for the second decade, and we're just now at a place over the last few years where there's other folks working here on the product.
Yeah.
So it's just like hard to let that go. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Or just shut
Um,
down development for a year. It's like you've been running 20 years, just like we're not basically doing anything. Like you
yeah.
can bug fixes, basic bug fixes, no infrastructure stuff, no nothing. Give them some big projects to like be building for the following that's not going to ship to the following year. It's like, all right, we're going to take on big thing X, try it
That's
out.
interesting.
So you don't have to like fire developers or whatever, but like,
I don't
yeah,
know. The we've got two developers working here other than myself, and both of them are fantastic. And like I think I've been able to let go of a lot of things because they like I really do trust them.
yeah,
And we brought on uh Daniel's partner John to do some product work with us,
Mhm.
um, and he's been able to like we're experimenting with him, sort of taking over the just like not as much product, but more like project management of just like leading our retrospectives and our planning sessions.
Yeah, so that
And
would
so
do it.
like it feels like I could sort of set a 6-month roadmap
Yeah.
and let them run with it. And I think that's maybe on the horizon. We'll see.
Oh, I'm excited to hear about this if you pull it off. That would be cool.
Yeah, I just don't know. Like I'll play video games for 2 weeks and then I don't then I'll have to figure something out, I guess.
Yeah, but I do miss being bored, I have to say. That's been something I've been experimenting more with also, but it's hard because there's just not a lot of time to be bored. But so yeah, if you pull that off, that would be something.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, read some more books,
Yeah.
go for a run every once in a while.
Yep.
Yeah. We'll see.
All right,
All
man.
right.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Thank you. This has been fun. Uh until next time, until our part 3, the AI
Yeah, we could do AI.
All right.
All right.